Hello everyone, I'm back. No face cam today. I'm a little bit crusty. I've had a cold. We've got Terran versus Terran. I'm trying a 2-1-1 build with a early expand. Not crazy early. We're 2 minutes in right now. I skipped the boring parts. What I'm trying to do right now is use U-Thermal's 2-1-1 build. I think it comes with a early aggression. I'm trying to play a lot more active, and hence the 2-1-1 bio focus. I tired of sitting in my base. We both send out Reapers. I just kind of post mine up here because I'm also macroing. The hard part about early game economic harassment is that the early game is also very essential to your build. I think I'm trying race-specific builds, so Terran versus Terran, Terran versus Protoss, Terran versus Zerg, having a different build for each of those matchups. It's fun because you can have a different strategy for each matchup, and you ideally should. Send in my Reaper. I decide to target fire his SCVs that are building buildings, because I find that's very annoying. Sometimes you forget that you don't have a worker on that building anymore, and it also messes up your build order. And I think especially on plat 3 right now in these early ranks, it's good to harass your enemies for psychological effect. I've been watching a lot of Vibes Bronze to Grandmaster series, and he really touches on macroing behind your micro. So the whole time I was doing that attack, I was still queuing up troops. And nice thing is when you're looking at your buildings from a hotkey, you can even queue up tech labs and orbital command centers. I've been also trying to focus on not being supply blocked all the time. I found that that's been a pretty constant battle of mine. Now we've both done our Reaper harasses and have realized the other person has enough troops to steer the Reaper harass away, so I'll speed up a little bit while we both macro. He had an SCV sitting at my natural, so that delayed it a bit, which isn't ideal, but you'll see down here he only has a slight worker lead on me. So all in all, our econ's not too different, but those little differences do make a big impact in mirror matchups. It's a little bit different in something like Terran versus Zerg, Terran versus Protoss, because Protoss can always chrono boost out more probes. That's their ability that makes them boost production out of a building. And then Zerg can just queue up a million drones after you kill them. And they're both of them I think are supposed to have more workers than you, because you can always call down mules to increase your mining productivity. I tried to dive that Reaper in to get a good view of his base, but since it got killed, I did do a scan. I'm trying to do a lot more scouting with my Reapers and medevac drops rather than rely on scans, because again, in Terran versus Terran, I think it's important to keep those mules going and try and keep an economic advantage. I'm trying really hard to find a balance between econ and focusing on my macro, because at plat 3 I feel like that's the biggest thing to work on, but at the same time you want to micro your troops at least a little bit. And so that's why right now I'm trying to get out on the map, get active, siege up outside of the enemy's base to delay their econ, their expansions with command centers. And the best way to do that is to spread your units and put your siege tanks in some cheeky spots. That way, when the fighting actually happens, you don't have to scramble to queue all your stuff together. The enemy has one medevac drop queued for my main, which respect. I like setting them up outside and then choosing when you want to send them in. He's going to do a fair amount of economic damage. I finally take my workers away. It's important to retreat your workers when these attacks happen. I select all army hotkey to respond to the attack, but then I re-queue all my troops out on the front line. I noticed it because he just did a medevac drop. That's one less pack of bio at his base. So I try and set up a good siege. I run those Marines back behind the orbital command center. It's an alright thing to do. I wish I kept them alive a little bit more, but they're still up there fighting and damaging his orbital. It's really these auto-attacking Marines down here that run into the tank fire. Now I get the rest of those Marines killed. One thing that I do eventually realize that helps out a lot is using the hold position command. I rebound that to Z as in Z. I found that helps me a lot in Terran versus Terran. That way your bio doesn't kite away into siege tank lines. I try and get a sneaky little siege in the low ground over here. I don't know, I don't think it did a ton of help throughout this, but at least it does something. You can see I'm still spending my minerals, whereas my opponent isn't. Now he has more workers than me, so it takes a little bit more effort for him to spend his minerals, and he does do it now, but you see that little gap of idle mining time helps me try and keep an edge despite being lower on workers. I'm not building workers right now out of my production tab, so that's a slap on the wrist for me. You want to always be making that until you're at a healthy worker count. It's a little bit later in the match, so you could pretend that I'm trying to focus troop production, but really it's just me falling apart on my macro. On the bright side, I'm still creating refineries and an armory so that I can get tech upgrades. We're currently matched 1-1 to infantry ground tech. I've been trying to focus on my upgrades a lot more too. It's tough because I'm trying 3 different builds, and so you don't have your muscle memory as keen as when you just have one build for all 3 matchups. You can see that my tank on the low ground is doing good work on the opponent's bio. It helps me keep this plane right here, which provides vision. Now if we look at my vision, wrong one. Okay, right there. I can't see his orbital command center, but this tank is in range just by like a tiny hair. And this these Vikings are what give me vision. He does a scan at the same time, which was a pretty smart play. But you can see that I'm sieged up, not allowing him to expand to a third, while my third is slowly getting saturated. I've been working on my SCV counts. This main took some damage from the medevac drop that I never recovered, but I don't have any oversaturated bases, so it's not the worst thing in the world. The opponent tries to break out, but these pre-splits you can see really help me keep him from pushing down into my backlines, which tanks would ideally be, but I'm not building enough tanks right now. I'll tell you, it's almost as important to be pumping tanks out as much as you're trying to pump SCVs out. We both have a decently high mineral and gas banks, so we're both playing a little bit too much with our troops rather than focusing on macro. But you can see now I've pulled ahead with a decent worker advantage. And if you see these pluses, it's showing that I have a much higher income advantage, not in gas. I have 1 out of 3 workers in both my second and third, which is not ideal. That's a those are the cons of when you try and micro too much. The Terran does break out and make a third. It was a pretty clever play out of him. He took 2 medevac drops from his natural and dropped it to his third. I'm keeping a mental note of that for when I'm in similar situations. He now has liberators too, so if I had a lot of tanks here, they'd be at a disadvantage, but I've already decided to macro up. You can see I'm building upgrades and a ton of them, and I'm building a fusion core, not for liberator range, but I am building 2 starport reactors, I think. No, those are barracks reactors. You can see I've got a lot of production going on now. I've been finding that there's this tough balance you have to do between building buildings and building troops. I think a good rule of thumb is however many SCVs you have and bases saturated, you can kind of get a feel of how many production buildings you can realistically support, because ideally you want all of your production buildings to be building at full capacity. In the bottom right you can see my hotkeys, and I was able to get a fair amount of my buildings going at once, but because I'm trying to do a transition into battle cruisers, it makes it a little bit weird. Maybe I could pull off on some bio and put that towards my battle cruisers. I'm definitely making a lot of marauders. You don't really need marauders a ton in Terran versus Terran. You just want the high DPS glass cannon marines, especially with combat shields, so they can survive the AoE a little bit better. I send out a medevac drop. This is both to harass and to scout. The biggest thing I want to do is see if the opponent has any extra bases expanding, because there's so much room down here. This is a pretty large map. If we look at the everyone view, he unfortunately expanded to a different spot. I'll speed things up again a bit. This is where I decided to fully max out and really focus on macro. This is where I realized it's a macro match now. I took the little economic advantage I could. I think that's shown in my supply. What I ended up doing here was dropping my medevac drop on the SCVs to try and get his siege tank to blow them up, but it didn't work. But at least I was able to see he has a lot of SCVs on his third, so he isn't prioritizing just a giant fast army. He's also macroing, and when that's the case, you really want to double down on your macro. I'm in a weird spot. I've got way too much bio for trying to go into battle cruisers, but that's okay. I've got a lot of Vikings, so at the very least I'm ready to go into battle cruisers. It's a little bit risky to have too many battle cruisers and not enough Vikings, because if the opponent goes into mass Vikings, you'll just lose your battle cruisers right away. I sent in a couple Marines, and I found out that he does have a fourth, and so I started moving out to the fourth, but I think I caught a lucky scan on it? No, I didn't. I think these guys, he walks, well, he attacks, and so that's when I divert my army. I just kind of select all army hotkey right now. This is pretty unfortunate. I have two bases set up and he attacks them, and my battle cruisers show up a little bit early, so they're able to get gunned down. That's one of the reasons why Marines are so good in Terran versus Terran. But the battle cruisers hold them off long enough for my giant swath of bio to come up from behind and pincer his main attack. These are weird spots. I think I should attack right now. If you look at the army supply count, I'm really high ahead, but deep down I really want to get a full-fledged battle cruiser army going. It's funny, I recently watched my how to play like Maru video before I played this match, and I think that really helped me, because it made me realize one tank at each base is pretty great. My bases are a bit oversaturated, but he did just kill my fourth base, so I don't have a lot of spot for these refugee SCVs to go. This is where I realized that might be his entire army, so I do start getting out onto the map. But yeah, I found in Terran macro, you really want to set a big broad front line, and the tanks around your bases and setting these key spots are really helpful. This is where I realize it's a little bit harder to attack his fourth than I would have hoped. Yeah, he had the SCVs repairing his planetary fortress, and it is one of those hard parts about Terran versus Terran that you almost want to siege in their weak areas to keep them from expanding, because when they've already expanded, they are hard to break through and do some damage, and you could easily end up going up a hill into siege tanks or just running straight into a planetary fortress and losing most of your army supply. I still have good army lead on the opponent, but his worker count is higher than mine, so it is quite the slog of a macro match. I'm able to save one battle cruiser. The other one gets taken down by his Vikings. This is where I try and kill the SCVs. I don't think this is a good play because I'm sacrificing a lot of army supply and I've only pulled a minuscule worker lead. This is where tanks are really good. If I had enough tanks sieged up, I could take out the command center, but I'm really focused on my battle cruisers right now. I have 3 queued. I'm confused if I've been getting this top and bottom mixed up between me and the opponent this commentary. So keep that in note. But we're alright. I finally get a half decent fleet of battle cruisers. When you're playing Hearts of Iron, that World War II sim game, you really want like 9 cruisers together to form a fleet. Although these are battle cruisers, so maybe 3 battle cruisers and then a bunch of cruisers, but we only have battle cruisers here, so I don't know how that translates. And something about like 2 or 3 battleships, but no battleships here, just battle cruisers. They do a decent job at fighting off of the Terran bio, but I do decide to pull them back. So when I'm doing Terran versus Terran and going into battle cruisers, mainly when I'm going into battle cruisers at all, I always find that there are 2 things that I fall apart on. The first is drawing a front line with some siege tanks, turrets, and scanning towers. The second is setting up a front line by having extra orbital commands which provide scans and provide opportunities to expand by floating the buildings out. The Terran keeps hitting me in my weak spot. He's found that this command center on the low ground is typically free real estate for him, and it continues to be. When you notice that the opponent has a tendency to attack one side of your base, it's good to expand to the opposite side. Yamato cannons are really effective, but this is where you see that a higher Viking count to battle cruiser count is tough to deal with. I fight it out to keep this command center alive. I probably pulled those mules a little early. He's microing them all down, but the reinforcements do trickle in, and that's where I think bio is just always nice to have as a Terran, and it's always nice to have an option to spam out bio by having a healthy amount of barracks, even if you're trying to do battle cruisers. Sorry for my sniffling. Another thing I feel like I was lacking on here was I only had 1 tech lab factory throughout this whole fight. I think maybe 2 more factories would have been nice because it's not as important in Terran versus Zerg to have tanks as it is Terran versus Terran. I feel like Terran versus Terran, it's most important to have tanks. This is an important part for me, so I'm going to pause and go at normal pace and just let you know we're even going to follow what I'm looking at. After you lose, this is first person view, so what I mean by what I'm looking at. After you lose your army a couple times, take a deep breath. We're 22 minutes in, both of us are on 4 or so bases, so you got a macro, you're in a macro match. Even after a bit of fighting, it's honestly, especially after a bit of fighting, maybe battle cruisers aren't great for harassment. If you warp them in, you should walk them in the long way and then warp them out. Even after a fight, or especially after a fight, you want to take some time to macro. You look in the bottom right corner, I'm making a lot more ground units while having, you look in the top left, 5 battle cruisers queued up. So, and that what I just did right here, I'm gonna run it back and then go back through. I have camera hotkeys on F1 to like F6. And so you can easily flick through all your command centers and see how their mineral lines are. And that's just such an important thing to get, especially the more you get into late game. He's taking a while to get to it. There it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that's oversaturated. So grab some SCVs, key them to my expansion. Could grab 2 more, put them over here, and look at that. That's macro. I'll speed up a bit. Our opponent, I keep cutting down his army, so these engagements for me haven't been ideal, but at least I've been keeping his supply count low. He's really focusing on econ right now, but I'm getting close to maxing out again, which is when I tend to like to do my late game attacks, is when you're maxed out, because there's a sort of critical mass that you reach with bio, and I also feel with battle cruisers. Before you hit that critical mass, you can lose a lot of your troops pretty quick. Sorry, I'm like zooming in and out so much. I just realized that I can do that. But yeah, you almost want to do that Protoss death ball when you hit late game, or choose to stay at a fortified base and constantly do harass while keeping enough army to defend any run-bys. I completely missed his 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 4th base because he flew out his main, which I also did. That's a fun thing you can do when you completely mine out your main. But I do set up to attack his base on the low ground. But I see that he has a little bit of a battle cruiser army up here. And this is where I make a vital decision. I could go for econ, or I could take out his army. I decided to just go heads up with the army. The nice thing about having all these bio units is they're great at taking out air units while distracting or my fleet of battle cruisers. And there you have it. We got the dub. Overall, I'd say it wasn't one of my best matches, but it wasn't one of my worst. I feel like Terran versus Terran battle cruisers, I always struggle to make that tech transition. And I feel like I always struggle in the macro. So I think I did a decent job relative to my past performances in maintaining my macro while not just throwing handfuls of armies that are like this small at the enemy. I actually built up a bit of a fleet. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Leave a comment. What's your favorite matchup to watch in pro play? Who's your favorite pro player? I don't know. All right, thanks. Subscribe, like, bye.